The sell of the harvester food shipment from Sparrow left Shineless with a heap of clams in her account. She walked through the trade quarter while her mother watched over little Caroline. She went through shops and loaded up on fabric, tech, and a couple Hummer bracelets just in case. She paid a Stygian porter to take her good back to the harvester freighter. She then left the trade quarter and walked over to the restaurants. She approached an open bar with a grazer cook behind it. "Hello, human female. Are you hungry?" She nodded and looked over the menu. She sniffed the air. "What smells so good?" The grazer raised his snout in pride. "That is Sonu-soaked miffer. Would you like to purchase a dish?" She looked over at the pot. "I'll taste it first." He wiggled happily over to the pot and pulled out a hunk of meat. He reached over and offered it to her. "Try. You will like it. Many of the soldiers from the human ship have tried it. They all liked it." She took it into her mouth and started chewing. "Oh, wow. That is really good. What's a miffer?" He looked around and thought. "It digs in the ground. It eats under plants. We stab them, pull them up, put in basket, put in pot. You are eating one." She nodded. "I like it. Give me a bunch to go." He wiggled back over and began filling a Togo bucket. He filled it halfway, then looked over at her. "That good?" She shook her head. "Fill it to the top." He looked over her, noting her dirt-stained overalls. "You have money?" She nodded and sent over some. He checked the amount and retallied it, giving her back change. "You're good." He handed her the bucket of miffer meat. "Enjoy, little one." She smiled. "I will, thank you." Shineless walked around the current outer ring until she got to the dark side hall she had heard about. She looked down the corridor. Dark mist moss hung down from covered-over lights. "This is the hall for sure." She held onto the bucket and started walking in. She pushed aside the hanging moss, ducking under some of the heavier clumps. A cluster of rabbit rats darted back into a vent as she neared. Several of the circle gnats buzzed in her face, and she swatted them away with her free hand. She moved more moss and could finally see a door at the end of the hall. Then she heard a low growl. "Found you," she said, as the hagfish's guardian stepped out of its alcove. Shineless stared into the massive, contorted version of her face. The guardian stared back, mandibles starting to squeeze out from its version of her mouth. Shineless noticed its musculature shifting. She lifted up the bucket and pulled out a chunk of miffer. She tossed the meat lightly at the guardian. It fell at the tips of its pointed legs. It stared at her, but the scent of the cooked meat caused it to slowly lower to the ground. The guardian sniffed the lump and then lashed out with its unfurled mandibles. It devoured the lump and then stood back up staring at her. She smiled and pulled another free. She held it out for it. The guardian tilted its giant head, slowly re-extending its mandibles. As one of its pedipalps touched it, it pulled back. It then brought the pedipalp back into its lips, tasting the sauces. Shineless didn't move. "It's okay, girl. You can have it. Take it." The guardian extended its mouthparts back out, pedipalps slowly coddling the meat hanging from her hand, and then in an instant the meat disappeared into its mouth. Shineless smiled. She pulled another piece free from the bucket and held it out. The guardian started for it, but Shineless walked over to the wall and sat down, still holding it out. The guardian slowly followed her and reached for it. "Sit," she said. The guardian kept reaching for the meat and she pulled it back. "Sit down and you can have more." The guardian looked at her, then at the miffer meat in her hand. He clawed its way closer, and then lowered its armored body down next to her. "Good girl," Shineless said as she handed the guardian another lump. About 20 minutes had passed when 3 hagfish stepped out the door and stopped. The hagfish turned their heads in their cloaks, teeth rippling, as they tried to ascertain what they were seeing. Their temple guardian was on its side, letting the red-headed human female whose visage it shared scratch its soft underbelly. Shineless looked up at them, lips partially parted and teeth showing. "Sam told me about her. He made her sound horrible, but she's a sweetie." The 3 hagfish slithered over and knelt down, watching as her fingered hand scratched the beast. "The guardian enjoys her touch," one said. "It is fond of humans. It helped protect the Sam." Another said, Curious, the third said. We wish to know how you did this. You lack the chemical emitters we use. This should not be. You should not be able to pacify it like you are. She reached over and scratched its stringy head of red hair. I can teach you, but you gotta do me a favor first. The hagfish looked at her, and the first replied, Name it. We wish to know your secrets. She looked at the guardian as it clicked with contentment. Go down to the little grazer cookpot hole in the wall and get me 2 more buckets of miffer meat. One of the hagfish turned to the other 2 and waved a tendril. Go! She needs more miffer meat. The other 2 scurried off through the mossy hallway. Shineless reached out her hand, taking one of the hagfish's tendrils and guided it to the guardian's tummy. She likes it if you rub here. The hagfish swirled its tendril as Shineless instructed. You're doing good, Shineless said. She likes that. Shineless checked the time on her arm display. The allotted time had passed, and she changed her walk to take her to the zoo. She entered through the main arm doors and continued through the enclosure area and into the back garden. She saw the preserver waiting, and he motioned her to come over. Hello, Shineless. We are all ready. Please follow me. She nodded and followed him, watching his 3 feet do their circular walk. She chuckled. He led her through an opening in a wall of yellow, flowering, purple-leaved plants. She gasped. There was a long table covered in a white, shining cloth. On one end of it was a pile of cubes with ribbons and bows tied on them. Across the rest of the table was a spread of plates of food. Numerous women were clapping and smiling at her. Sam and Asterion were on the back wall watching. 3 women approached her, as did her mama Pouchcheek. She scanned and saw Sam was holding baby Caroline, and her adrenaline started lowering. A dark-haired woman reached out with her hand. Hi, I'm Olivia. Sam told me all about you. I helped him put this together for you. A short woman smiled with her hand out. Micah, nice to finally meet you, Shineless. Shineless smiled at them and shook their hands in turn. What is this? She asked. Olivia pointed around at everyone. This is your baby shower. It's a party we're throwing for you and Caroline. Pouchcheek bobbed her ears and dove in and hugged Shineless. They are proud of you, girl. We love our grandbaby. Shineless hugged her back and started crying. I was worried. I didn't know you'd do something like this. This is so nice of you. Olivia motioned she wanted a hug. Shineless kissed her mom's bald, glimmering head and moved over to hug Olivia. You give parties for babies? Olivia squeezed her in a quick hug. We give parties for women who are becoming mothers. Olivia looked into her eyes. Because they deserve it. Olivia led Shineless over to the head of the table and sat her down. Micah went over to the drinks. Shineless, did you want anything particular to drink? We got tea, lemonade, water, milk, and Moose has made a honey soda. It's pretty good. Shineless was beaming. I'll have Moose's soda. Moose walked away from the crowd and gave Asterion a light punch in the arm. She's trying my soda. Moose then offered Sam and Asterion the cups of mead in his hands. The 3 stood next to the wall and watched as the group of women sat around Shineless and started bringing over the gifts. Sam took a sip of his mead and smiled. Shineless spent the afternoon opening presents, holding and feeding Caroline, and chatting with the women from the Pozar. Crunch Crunch arrived later, bringing a large sheet of lemon squares from the cornucopia. The men started hauling the presents to the harvest freighter. Asterion shouldered the box containing the unassembled crib. Sam carried several food preparation devices. Pouchcheek walked over to Shineless as she talked to Olivia, bouncing baby Caroline on her shoulder, patting the baby on the back. Daughter, your dad and I will watch little girl tonight. You go out with the ladies. You need to socialize with your kind. Pouchcheek held out her hand. Shineless looked at Olivia and Micah, then to her alien adopted mother. You all talked about this? What are you planning now? Micah patted her on the shoulder. Your mom is letting you have a ladies' night. Come on, you're going to have fun. Shineless handed over the child. Pouchcheek took her in all 4 arms and hugged her close to her shoulder. We will get her to her bed. She will be fine. Shineless leaned over and kissed her mom on the cheek. Thank you, Mom. Pouchcheek walked over to Crunch Crunch. taking one of his hands in one of hers while still holding the baby tight. Shineless watched them walk out of the garden. Olivia walked over to the table to one of the few boxes still left. She brought over a black dress and some platforms. "You gotta get out of your overalls for tonight." Shineless looked at the clothing with a grimacing face. The three women walked out of the new hot dam with drinks in hand. A grazer walked close, and they pointed at him. Olivia shouted, "Move yourself 4 legs! We're walking here!" The grazer quickly scurried out of the way. The three women watched it and laughed. Micah grabbed Shineless' shoulder. "It's almost time. You ready for where we're going next?" Shineless shook her head. "I don't know where we're going and I'm whooshy." Shineless held up her hand, laughing, moving it like a wave. Olivia leaned her head back with her eyes shut, laughing with her. "I'm whooshy too." She leaned into a punch and hit Micah's right shoulder. "You're whooshy too." Micah nodded. "I am. We got seats though. We gotta go." Shineless shook her head. "I don't want to see the musical. That doesn't feel fun." Micah laughed. "Come this way. We're not going to see that dumb musical." She led her down a hall toward a red door with 2 Kratuk officers guarding it. She held her display and sent the 2 guards a file. "We have tickets." The officer on the right opened the door. "Go on in, ladies." Micah led them down through the rows of seats to the front by the center ring. Micah squeezed past a group of Young and Finnegan, a tray of floating scribblers, and sat down in the only 3 open seats. She pulled Shineless down to sit beside her. "You're going to love this. He's been practicing all week for it." The 3 women got seated and waited for a few minutes when the lights dimmed. A large, bright light directly over the ring came on. A web creature in a tube floated to the center of the ring. It broadcast over the arena's speakers. "People of the Twain, visitors from afar, we welcome you. Tonight we have a special treat." Another light came on, illuminating a large Kratuk walking in from a side door. "We have Captain Killall, the liberator of its people, the pirate lord and villain turned whiskey merchant, the oldest of the Kratuk." Killall entered the ring with its 4 arms raised. Its mating spears leapt out of its 2 large upper arms and then retracted. The Webian turned as another light came on. "Coming in now is Asterion, battle commander of the Battle of Kawaru, savior of the zoo, the human hybrid." The crowd cheered as Asterion Slow walked in with his massive arms raised. He entered the ring and stared at Killall. Micah grabbed Shineless. "That's my man! Look at that beast!" The Webian referee continued. "Combatants, touch fists!" The 2 fighters extended their large fists and patted knuckles. Asterion then bounced back onto his heels. Killall threw an arm down to the ground and launched kick. Asterion blocked it and grabbed one of Killall's arms and threw the creature. Killall found its footing and cartwheeled to the other side of the ring, right in front of the women. Micah shouted, "Get him, Asti!" Asterion grinned and charged forward, head down. Killall accepted charge and grappled. Asterion lifted his head. His protective capped horns helped lift Killall. Asterion thrust his massive neck back and dropped Killall onto its lumpy head. Killall roared and rolled in pain. Asterion knelt on the back of its hinged knee and punched 3 times into Killall's back. Killall grabbed with one of its small arms, its 4 fingers clenching onto Asterion's leg. Asterion fell down beside Killall. Killall rolled on top of the Minotaur and began punching with all 4 of its fists in a rotating order. Asterion brought his arms up to block. Asterion bucked, using his core to lunge his head forward. He cracked Killall across its face with his thick forehead. Killall fell off backward. Asterion got back to his feet and jumped. He wrapped his arms around Killall's neck and arms. Asterion maneuvered his legs, pinning Killall's legs in place. Killall struggled, squirming, but Asterion held firm. The Webian ref floated over in its tube. 1, 2, 3. Shineless was gripping Olivia's leg, rapt at attention. "Is he dying?" Olivia laughed. "No, he's got it pinned." Olivia pointed as the ref kept counting. 10. Asterion let go and stood up. Killall crawled and sat up. Asterion lifted both arms up and roared. Micah squealed, "Fucking animal, you fucking beast!" The girls left out back through the guarded door. Micah leaned into Shineless. "It was an awesome night, Shineless. We have to do this more." Shineless leaned back. Thank you both again. I had a blast tonight. Olivia hugged them both. Shineless damn good to you? Shineless nodded. Yeah, he's been super worried. He texts every few hours to check on me. Olivia looked at Micah. Micah stood straighter. Is he okay with you hanging out with us? Shineless smiled. Oh yeah, I told him I was going out. He sent a happy face and some drinks. He's mostly missing us, I bet. Olivia smiled. Good. He supports your visit then? Shineless looked at her. Not at first. He thought Caroline was too young to travel, but he gave in. I had to yell at him. Micah laughed. Good. Don't let him walk all over you. Shineless shook her head. Definitely not. Micah hugged her again. I have to call it a night. My man needs me back home. Olivia hugged them both. Take care of him, Micah. Thank you for helping me set up today. Micah backed off, smiling. It was awesome. She turned to Shineless again. It was good to hang out with you, Shineless. We're going to have to do it again. Shineless waved as she stepped away. You're welcome on Sparrow anytime. Olivia walked Shineless back through the current outer ring toward the trade quarter. Olivia heard movement behind them and turned. She screamed. Shineless turned and was face to face with the twisted, mirrored visage of the Guardian. Shineless laughed. Come here, girl! The Guardian shivered and crawled over to her. Shineless ran her hands through its hair and found its big ears. She began scratching. Did you miss me, girl? Olivia took a step back. That thing has your face. What the fuck is it? What the fuck is that? Holy shit! Shineless laughed. The hagfish made it. They think I'm scary, so they modeled it after me. Olivia stepped over. Will it bite me? Olivia kept an eye on the appendages moving around its teeth. It's huge! Shineless grabbed Olivia's hand and put it on the side of the Guardian's head. She likes it if you scratch there. Olivia began scratching the giant insect-bodied monstrosity. Is this the thing from the report? When the first Galak attacked the station? Shineless nodded. Yeah, that was Perry. Shineless looked at the Guardian and slowed her scratching. Girl, you want some more Miffer? Miffer? Olivia asked. Shineless nodded. You're going to love it. It melts in your mouth, but it's clumpy. Olivia shrugged, and the three started walking back down towards the restaurants. Sam stepped into his office and sighed. He walked over to the coffee brewer and got a pot going. He yawned as he stretched awake. The pile of messages motivated him to throw on clothes and come straight into work. He stood staring for a moment, his mind still foggy, as the coffee brewer filled the pot. He paused it and poured himself a cup. He then unpaused it, went to sit at his desk. Sam smiled at the thank you note from Spitzlittle. He then looked at the data feed coming from both the Raga and the Grendel. Both mechs were operational and running ground to space tests around Kawaru Prime. So far so good. No rogue signatures yet. Sam clicked over to the next message. Damn, had Erebus construct an Oblivion carrier of his own. The Brumus was near completion, and he wanted to petition Twain residents to join the crew. Sam marked a confirm on it and sent it to orbit. Next was a tall list of reports from numerous TIA excursions. The Senate had approved sending numerous scouts across the Rim worlds looking for peoples to join or trade with. Sam clicked on the first report. A set of scribblers had snuck aboard a visitor's ship and absconded to a world 5 sectors out from the Rim edge. It was a great arm world, owned by the Goadur. There were 7 uplifted subservient species, and they had started a wall on the world. They had 7 recruits already and were planning on a propaganda campaign. Nice. Stay safe, brothers. Sam sent funds to purchase a freighter to run supplies to the world and start trade using clam coins. The next message was a detailed report of TARPA research at the Kawaru prison platform. 17 Galak clusters had shown progress in reformation. Perry was teaching them the basics of all the casino floor games. Self-control tests using pigs and cows had proven successful with the exception of one subject. That subject was reprimanded and put in isolation. Orbit. Yes, sir. The purple holographic boy appeared. How can I help you? Do you have any information on the incident at the Kawaru Galak holding facility? The one about the reprimanded subject and the pigs? Yes, sir. Nova sent me video. I'd like to see it. Orbit sent the file to his display and Sam opened it. The Gallic-controlled bodies were lined up against a wall as a series of farm animals was walked past them. Sam noted many had tendrils seeping toward the animals, but pulled them back in, showing restraint. One of the prisoners in the middle couldn't pull a tendril back and latched onto a large sow. The Gallic's bodies opened up and enveloped the pig, absorbing it into its bodies. 3 Scribbler Knights fired at it with their Hummer guns. 3 Gallic prisoners were caught in the area of effect, including the one lacking self-control. The Knights then pulled Humstunners off their hips and discharged the melee weapons into the already grounded Gallic. They then pulled it up and locked it onto a floating containment cart. Sam turned off the video and sighed. Well, some are learning. Still, I find it hard to even trust Perry, let alone these enemy combatants. I agree, sir. It would be a high risk letting them work on any Twain world. Sam took a long sip of his coffee. Orbit, I want you to run simulations. See if there are any tasks they could perform that doesn't involve them being amongst the general population. Yes, sir. Running through potentials now. Sam clicked over to the next message. TIA scout ships had scanned several of the worlds from the Great Arm Mythos report. One after another was showing glass status, a total of 25. The next batch were Gallic harvested worlds, their native populations devoured. Those totaled in the hundreds, all on the edge of totemic space. There were 7 moons containing ruins that were dated to pre-Great Arm organizational era, some 17 million years ago. Then there were the dozen of death worlds, marked with large warning signs. Sam looked over the TIA scans of the 12 death worlds. The worlds were teeming with life signs. Each world had a large energy focal point emanating on the world's equator. Orbit. These death worlds in the TIA scout report. What is this energy signature? It has a resonation of a water-fueled fusion reaction, sir. Sam looked at it. Each of these worlds has an active fusion reactor on them. He looked at their locations. They are scattered all across the rim, and they are deep into the galactic clusters too. Are they all from the same culture? Orbit walked up beside him. They all have identical energy signature patterns, and their location is a match on each world. I think you are right in them having a singular originator. Sam looked at a detailed report from one of the scouts. Numerous predatory species, terrestrial and airborne threats. Chemo indicators indicate advanced biological pathogens. Sam flipped through the file. One of the death worlds was deep in the Gallic harvested regions. Orbit, this world is odd. Orbit looked over the file. I agree, sir. Sam leaned back. A world full of life that the Gallic are leaving untouched. Why? Unknown. From the scan of the world, it is just as dangerous as the other death worlds. Any mission there would be a high risk, and then you have the Gallic in the region on top of that. Sam nodded. We should investigate one of the better located death worlds, get an idea on what is going on there. Agreed. Sam clicked the next file. I didn't want to deal with this mess, he said after reading the title. The Senate's dealings on the topic of healthcare. Sam read through it. Oh wow, they actually did something good. Sam read on, and the Kawaru collective running the factory on the upper levels of Twain Station had created a trust, funded by a percentage of the profits, that was allocated to paying the heir to take care of any who needed medical aid. The Margot, Scribblers, Craddock, Grazers, and Fuimos all agreed to it and gave similar funding. Sam looked over the numbers, and the trust was fully funded. The heir had been grateful for the enhanced funding, and are now requesting a larger hospital be built. Sam clicked the approve button. Nice. Sam leaned back and finished his coffee. Yay, work done for the day. Asterion grabbed a hunk of raw meat from the bucket and tossed it into the Ralk Toll enclosure. The water rippled, and several small creatures shimmied onto the shore. Their backs were covered in spines and ridges. They sniffed the air, and then attacked the meat chunks. Micah stood near the railing. I love those things. Man, look at them. They're viscous. Asterion clicked the button on his chest device, and the shield field closed back shut. If you or I fell in there, we would be flensed within minutes. I am not a fan of them. Micah stepped away from the rail and moved closer to the tower. You still like working here for the Preserver? You seem kind of down lately. Asterion shrugged. It pays. We have our apartment. What else would I be doing? Micah spun around with her hands out. We have the entire universe to do whatever we want. We could go anywhere, do anything. Asterion walked over to the cart and refilled the meat bucket for the next enclosure. My classes show me all I want to know of the universe. He looked at her. It's mostly void, radiation, and death. I'm happy well enough here. He looked back down to check the fill of the bucket. I don't need anyone else trying to kill me. She grabbed a hunk of meat. I'm not saying we go anywhere else. There is lots to do within the Clouder worlds. We could go to Sparrow, get some fresh air, see the greenhouse valleys. Asterion walked over to the shark tank. He started tossing in meat, causing a commotion as the bull shark started a frenzy. Micah tossed her chunk in. The preserver paid me 10,000 clams for my shark tooth necklace. I thought he was stupid, but... She looked at the fully grown shark swimming inside, darting after the meat. I was wrong. Asterion looked at her. These are Earth creatures? Micah nodded. Yeah. Sharks are common in the Earth's oceans. There's lots of different ones. Bull sharks are my favorite. They can go into freshwater, too. She grabbed several more chunks and tossed them into the tank. He should really label these enclosures. Make it feel like a real zoo. She smiled at Asterion. Let the people going through actually learn something. Micah rubbed her hands on the cart cloth. It's amazing he makes so much just from selling info and specimens. I'm surprised he hasn't thought about advertising and charging admission. Asterion paused and looked at her. Zoos on Earth do that. Micah nodded. Yeah, there are zoos throughout the Hue, and they all charge admission. It's how they pay to take care of the animals. Asterion smiled. I like your ideas. I will get him to give us more info on these creatures. You can make the info labels? She smiled. Of course. You going to start selling tickets? Asterion took a deep breath. Yes, and I will give my people jobs here. The preserver is content in his lab. This area is just a side hobby of his. We could run this zoo. Micah headbutted his chest. You oaf. Took you all of a minute to find something you want to do. He hugged her. I'm lucky I have an idea, woman. If you're already one of our Patreon supporters, you can now access the latest chapter of 99.9% of the universe 24 hours before its YouTube release. If you're interested in early access, follow the link in the pinned comment below. Your subscription also supports the author who receives a share, enabling them to keep writing the story you love. Thank you for your support.